Hello, this is the first lecture for the economics class that I've given, and I'm expecting it'll take half an hour to 45 minutes, and it is a look at the role of the government in the United States, either the federal or local or both governments, in fighting poverty. The lecture will say a little bit about poverty and how it's defined, and then it will go on to its primary function. And most of the lecture will be spent simply describing some of the major government anti-poverty programs that exist in the United States. And yeah, I'll look at at 8 programs in total, say a little bit about each one of them. Obviously, my discussion cannot be comprehensive, but by the time I'm done, you'll know about these important programs and have a little bit of knowledge about how they work and their size. So off we go. Well, as I've said at the start of this course earlier, a big part of economics is learning, these introductory economics is learning terms that you're probably already familiar with, but learning their more specific definitions for economics. And, you know, there's something similar to be said about poverty in this regard, right? Poverty, of course, has a casual definition. It's people who don't have enough money to live decently. That's poverty. Fair enough, okay? However, governments, in order to fight poverty, or in other ways deal with poverty, can't be quite that relaxed. And one thing that they have to do, or at least do, is to define poverty. And the way that the government in the United States does this is to establish what's known as a poverty threshold, right? And this is sort of an annual income level that is deemed necessary for a person or a household to survive on. So recently, in 2018, according to the United States government, a family consisting of one parent and one child had to have a household income of below $17,308 to be considered actually poor. Right? Another example would be for a 4-person family where 2 of the people were children. And in this situation in 2018, the poverty threshold was set at $25,485. That is, if you earned more than that, you were not considered to be poor. If you earned less than that, you were considered to be poor. Those numbers might not mean a whole lot to you, just to give you some sense of their I guess, significance. Currently, again, in 2018, the median household income in the United States was $63,000 a year. And of course, a median is where about half the population was below that income level, and the other 50% was above that income level. So as you can see, the poverty level for a family of 4 here is well below the median income of an average American family. I could also just say that, you know, my own salary is at around $60,000. I live comfortably but modestly. I would find the prospect of having to support a family of 4 people on $25,000 a year extremely challenging. I don't envy people who are in that situation. Another sort of big picture statement about poverty and sort of the scope and nature of poverty is to observe that using these threshold numbers, which vary from family to family, and as you've seen, their different family structures have different threshold levels. But at any rate, currently in the United States, about 12% of households are below the poverty threshold and are thus officially considered to be poor. Okay? So that's a little bit of introductory remarks about all of this. Now to turn to what the government does about fighting poverty, besides simply defining it and, well, and describing it. So there are different ways that the government takes action to deal with this. One thing that the government does, as I'm sure you guys know, is to provide certain goods and services. Probably the most famous example of this is public education. right? That's something that's provided by the government. If you go to public school, those are government owned and operated. Public school teachers are government employees. And the big idea behind public education is to have the government provide it free of charge for everyone, except of course you have to pay taxes, but it's essentially directly it is free of charge. And the idea here is to enable lower income people to have access to that education. So that's just an example of government providing goods and services as a way of providing fighting poverty. You may also be aware that there are government tax policies to fight poverty. So tax policies are another method. One of these policies that you may or may not know about, it's an important and kind of famous one, is, I'm going to switch to screen share briefly here. All right. Go to this, we'll look at my screen, and now what do I have to do here? I have to move this around, bring this up. Okay, that was a little clumsy, but there you are. Okay, so one well-known and important and specific example of a tax policy that's designed to fight poverty is what's known as the Earned Income Tax Credit. I'm sure you guys have all heard of the federal income tax. Well, one of the characteristics of the federal income tax in the United States is that low-income workers are eligible for what's known as the Earned Income Tax Credit, which means, in other words, that they have their income tax reduced, or in some cases even eliminated, right? Since they're not making much money in the first place. All right, so that's just an example of that. All right, I think I'm going to stick with having the piece of paper up here to take notes on from here on in. I may jump back in and show you guys my own magnificent face from time to time, but mainly it's going to be just looking at this screen. You'll hear my voice and you'll see me taking notes, or you'll see my notes. I do not talk. All right. Okay. Well, we come to, though, the main method by which government in the United States fights poverty, and this is something that's known as government, if I spelled it right, transfers. Government transfers are, well, they are essentially just what the name says. They are transfers of resources, often money. More on that in a moment. But at any rate, transfers of resources, monetary or otherwise, from sort of one group of people in the society to another group of people. So here we're talking about situations not where the government itself is producing goods or services, but it's rather moving money or other resources around. Not all government transfers are anti-poverty programs, but some of them are. And government transfers are the largest, the main method by which the United States government and state and local governments also, to some extent, fight poverty. This is a big thing. Financially speaking, a great deal of what the United States government and local and state governments do actually is transfer resources. I would say that about 45 to 50% of United States government quote unquote expenditures, right, are in fact government transfers. Okay. And we will look now at some of these famous government transfers, and some of what I'm about to tell you about will be familiar to you because, yeah, some of these government transfers are quite well known. So you'll learn a little bit more about them. Some of the other things that I will bring up are also government transfers, but you may not have heard of them. Okay, so now we'll start off with the most famous, the biggest, I suppose you might say it's the most important government transfer program of them all. And this is also an anti-poverty program, and this is known as Social Security. My guess is that you've all heard of before. Okay, Social Security is essentially an anti-poverty program to help the elderly and less well-known, the disabled. Okay. Really, it boils down to the biggest part of Social Security, in turn, is a old age pension. So, I mean, there are any number of aspects of Social Security, but by and large, for the most part, Social Security could be described as a government old age pension. You know, as you probably know, in the United States, basically, there are exceptions, but basically, you know, when you get old, you become eligible for Social Security and you start getting, you know, money for Social Security. And the idea here is to reduce old age poverty. Now, again, disabled people, you don't necessarily have to be old to get Social Security, but overwhelmingly, it's the elderly who receive it. The next thing that I will say about Social Security is that it is a government transfer. You knew that already, but more specifically, it is what is known as a cash transfer. You should know this, right? A cash transfer is a type of government transfer, and as the name suggests, a cash transfer is a government transfer in which the government actually moves around or transfers money, okay? In Social Security, if you are a beneficiary of Social Security, you receive money. I'm hoping that when I retire at age whenever, right, when I retire and I'm eligible for Social Security, I will be receiving a check. I believe it's monthly, right, from the United States government. Well, sort of because I'm old, okay? So know that term, know cash transfer, and know that Social Security is a cash transfer type of government transfer. This is a federal government program. It's the United States government that runs and funds Social Security, and it is big. It is big. As of 2012, about 22% of United States government spending, right, was allocated to Social Security payments. It's the single largest government program in financial terms that the United States government operates. You become eligible for Social Security, well, as you probably know, right, partly by being elderly or disabled, but also the key thing, I mean, that's a given, okay? But beyond that, the other key element of being eligible for Social Security is that you have to have work. So eligibility, I hope I'm spelling that right, right? Well, you have to be old or disabled, but beyond that, you must have worked and paid taxes. That's really how somebody who's elderly or disabled becomes eligible for the Social Security program. Is in their past, you know, they worked and paid taxes. Now, there are exceptions to this. If you were the dependent of somebody who's eligible for Social Security, if you're the dependent of somebody who did this, you can be eligible as well. So, for example, my grandmothers, right, they received Social Security benefits. Now, they were housewives all their lives, so they didn't work and pay taxes, right? But their husbands did, right? And so they, as dependents of their husbands, received Social Security benefits. All right, so that just fleshes that out a little bit. All right, so that's a little bit about Social Security. We come to another big and famous anti-poverty program that's also a government transfer, and this is Medicare. Medicare, and I'm going to clear up a little space here. Okay, how am I doing on time? I can't dawdle here. I don't want to rush, but I can't dawdle, and I'll move a little more quickly now that I'm getting into the topic. Okay, Medicare is basically health insurance for the elderly and also disabled. Okay. So if you're old and or disabled and you get sick, then you are going to get government help getting medical treatment with that. Okay. One thing, though, that's different from Medicare as opposed to Social Security is that Medicare, it's a government transfer program, okay? But it is not a cash transfer. Rather, Medicare is another type of transfer. It is what is known as an in-kind transfer program. Okay. And what this means is that In Medicare, the beneficiary does not receive money, right? So if you're old and you get sick, you don't get a check from the government to go and buy health care. Rather, what you get is health care itself. So in Medicare, right, you get beneficiary there. The beneficiary receives health care, not money, but the health care. So if I'm elderly and I'm retired and I get sick, I will go to a hospital or wherever, get treated, receive that treatment. Okay, I don't get money, I get the treatment, and then the government will reimburse the hospital or the clinic or whoever was the healthcare provider. Okay. Again, Medicare is a federal program. It's run by the federal government. It's actually administered by Social Security, so it's not strictly speaking Social Security, but it's kind of a part under the same sort of umbrella organization. So it's its own program, but it's administered by Social Security. The two, I guess you could say that Medicare and Social Security overlap a bit. And it is also a very large program financially. I would estimate, I think around in 2012, Medicare spending was around 13%. Okay, so this is another big chunk of what the United States government spends money on is Medicare. Okay. As with Social Security, the way you become eligible for Medicare is by having worked in the past and paid taxes in the past. All right. Now, those are two huge programs that have a tremendous sort of role on people's lives, for better or worse. Okay. And now we'll look at two other much smaller programs, but they're well known. I want you to be aware of them. We come next to what's known as unemployment insurance. Okay, often referred to simply as unemployment. You may have heard about that, people going on unemployment, and what they're talking about is unemployment insurance. This is a type of, again, it's government transfer. This is a type of government transfer, an anti-poverty program that's really designed to provide help to people who have lost their jobs, okay? More specifically, unemployment insurance amounts to income, right, while job seeking. Okay. So basically what unemployment insurance amounts to is if you've lost your job, right, well, now it's time to go find another job, but guess what? You still have to spend money on things like food and rent while you're job hunting, right? And that's what unemployment insurance is there for, right? It's to hopefully, provide you with an income while you are looking for another job. By the way, you can look for employment, though, right? You don't have to take any old job, right? You actually are given time to look for a job that is comparable to the job that you lost, okay? So when I'm out looking for, let's say I lose my job as a teacher, well, I don't have to immediately go and take a job flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, right? I could, if it might take me maybe I could find that job at McDonald's in just a couple of days, right? But I don't have to take that, right? With unemployment insurance, the way that it works, I could look for actually several months and receive unemployment insurance until I could find a job that was kind of, well, either being a teacher or something that was maybe a little bit like being a teacher. Okay, what else do I have to say? Unemployment insurance, it's a cash transfer, right? You get a check in the mail when you are on unemployment. This is a much smaller sort of anti-poverty program. I don't know what chunk of the government, revenue gets spent on unemployment insurance. Much smaller. And actually, the United States government does not directly fund unemployment insurance. Anyway, I'll come back to it in a moment. But this is much smaller in terms of the size of the U.S. economy. than Social Security or Medicare. What else can I say about it? Unemployment insurance is temporary. You cannot go on and on and on looking for a job until you find one that you absolutely, absolutely adore, right? Sooner or later, it will run out. And typically, you have between maybe 6 to 18 months to find another job that is comparable, right, before the unemployment benefits run out. So be aware of that, right? Months. Okay. And the income that you receive is not as large as what you got as when you were working. In fact, typically income is about 60 to 80% of your previous salary. That's something you got to remember too, is if you lose a job and you're eligible for unemployment insurance, that's good. That's a big help. But it also means it's like getting a big pay cut while you're looking. All right. Now, the thing about unemployment insurance is that unemployment insurance is generally run by state governments. So, okay, so if I lose my job in Michigan, it's really the state of Michigan that's helping me out here. Okay. And this is one reason for the fact that the benefits vary, the duration of the benefits varies because it varies from state to state. Although, even though unemployment insurance is funded by and run by state governments, it's important to realize that state governments in turn get a lot of their money from the federal government. To get unemployment insurance, it's the same old story. You have to have been working for a while and been paying taxes. Additionally, you have to have lost your job for legitimate reasons. That is, if you're really irresponsible, if you get a job and you just don't show up to work, or you're drunk all the time, et cetera, and you get fired, right? Or you've been caught stealing, right, from your employer, and you get fired, you're not eligible for unemployment insurance, right? This is more something happens because, there was a recession or something like that, or the company got bought by a larger company and they decided they didn't need you to work anymore because of new management policies. So you lost your job, but it wasn't because you were negligent. Okay. So that's something that has to be part of it. You have to have lost your job for legitimate reasons. And also, as you might have guessed, to receive these benefits, you have to be actively seeking employment, right? So I can't just sort of sit around and drink beer and watch television for months at a time and get these checks. I have to be out looking for work, right? So those are a few more things about unemployment insurance. Next, I'm going to say a little bit about this. This isn't a big program, but it's out there. It plays a significant part in some people's lives. Most people have heard of it, so you will too. Right, we come to what's known as workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is health insurance, right? But it is for on-the-job injuries. I first learned about workers' compensation when I had a summer job as a landscaper, and as we started work, the guy who I worked for told everybody a little bit about workers' compensation because we were eligible for it since we were going to start working as as landscapers. So anyway, workers' compensation, and the idea was if we got hurt, if we were out there and cut ourselves because while we were using a chainsaw or something like that, we were eligible to get get this benefit. Like Medicare, workers' compensation is an in-kind benefit. We were told that if we got hurt, what we should do is go immediately to a clinic. They would take care of us at the clinic, and then the clinic would get reimbursed. So we weren't going to get a check. No, we were going to get the health care, and then the healthcare provider would get the actual money from the government. Like unemployment insurance, let's see, push the wrong button. There we go. Like unemployment insurance, workers' compensation is really provided by and operated by state governments, not the federal government. Okay. And you become eligible for workers' compensation by having worked and paid taxes. So, all right. So that's a kind of a quick look at 4 anti-poverty programs that are well known. 2 of them are really big. The other 2 are pretty small potatoes, but they're out there and you may bump into them. So I want you to know a little bit about them. Observe that for all 4 of these, the key thing for being eligible to receive these, the benefits of these programs was that you had to have worked, okay? And then also paid taxes, okay? That was the key thing. This takes us to something else to know about these programs that I've been talking about. Now, these are all programs that have really been created largely to help the poor and to fight poverty. Indeed, they're primarily anti-poverty programs in terms of their intent, right? However, and this is key here, you don't need to be poor to receive benefits from these programs, even though they're anti-poverty programs, right? Okay. That's the thing. You don't need to be poor to get Social Security. You don't need to be poor to get unemployment. Okay. What you have to do is to have worked and paid taxes in the past. So, and even affluent people are eligible for these programs. And sometimes, indeed, it's not unusual for wealthy people to get greater benefits from these programs than poor people. And if you think about this, say with unemployment, remember I said that your unemployment benefits are a percentage of your salary, right? And so if you're an aerospace engineer who earns, $150,000, your benefits are 60 to 80% of $150,000. Whereas if you're a secretary who earns $40,000 a year, your unemployment benefits are 60 to 80% of $40,000. Right? So just, be aware of that, right? In fact, this phenomenon where, affluent receive benefits and often greater benefits than the poor. Right, this may seem kind of questionable. Is this a good idea? Is this all messed up? Is this crazy? You got rich people getting Social Security checks that are more generous than poor people, and at first glance, that seems really messed up. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but there are a couple of reasons for this situation. One thing about this situation is that the fact that these programs are structured this way does politically protect the poor's access to these programs, because guess what? Social Security, Medicare, etc. are really very popular programs. They're popular with middle class people. They're popular with wealthy people. Okay, and therefore it's very, very hard to tamper with these programs. It's very hard to take money away from these programs because upper and middle class people get all upset about this. So in practice, this does have the effect of really kind of protecting the poor's access to these benefits. Also, it avoids sort of a stigma, right? Lower income people are more willing to accept benefits out of these programs because pretty much they're eligible to everybody, right? And it doesn't mean that you're poor and therefore some sort of a loser to get Medicare or to get Social Security, right? So those are a couple of reasons for this very odd, apparently odd situation. And I don't say this is the right way or the wrong way to do things. I'm just saying that's the way it is. Okay. Well, now I'm going to look at 4 more anti-poverty programs. They are of a different type. These are means-tested programs. They are also cash benefit, or they are also government transfers. They're also government transfers, like the other 4 programs, right? But in addition to being government transfers, they are means-tested programs. Okay. Here am I? Okay. And what means-tested means ultimately is that you have to be poor to be eligible, right, for a program, right? Means sort of like your income and resources, right? And your income and resources have to be below a certain level, probably the poverty line, right, or the poverty threshold, in order to receive benefits from these programs. To be eligible for the programs I'm about to describe, it's not a question of whether or not you've worked and paid taxes, right? That's not the key issue. The key issue is, are you poor? And you have to be poor to be eligible. All right. This takes us to Medicaid, not Medicare, but Medicaid, right? But Medicaid, you might almost describe as Medicare, only it's for poor people. In other words, it's health care or health insurance for the poor, right? Okay. It's also in kind. It's an in-kind transfer. If you're poor and you get sick, well, you know, you may or may not be eligible for Medicare, but additionally, you may be eligible for Medicaid. However, what you do is you don't get money. You go to the healthcare provider, you get your healthcare, the government reimburses them. Medicaid is mainly a federal government program. But it's also partially funded by state governments as well. This is a big program, right, financially speaking. It's not as big as Medicare, or, well, actually it's comparable to Medicare. I'm sorry, it's comparable in size to Medicare. It's about half the size of Social Security. Right? So there's just a little bit about Medicaid. You know what that is, okay. Then we come to, what is this called here? Supplemental security income, also known by its initials frequently as SSI. Okay. Supplemental security income is sort of like Social Security, as its name suggests. However, it is for, again, elderly or disabled poor people, right? These are cash transfers. These are cash payments that are just, as the name suggests, really supplements to Social Security. So if you're eligible for Social Security, you get Social Security. But if in addition to Social Security, you are eligible, you're poor, right, you may get these additional payments, these supplemental security income payments. Supplemental security income is run by the federal government. It's really pretty good sized. Okay, but it's not nearly as big as, say, Medicare or Medicaid. In 2012, about 1.2% of federal government spending went to SSI. It's a pretty big program. It's probably maybe around $60 billion or something like that, but not nearly as big as Medicare or Social Security, right? So a little bit about Medicaid, okay? Just a very brief look at supplemental security income, and we'll come to, we got two more anti-poverty programs to look at. I'll be pretty brief with them. Next we come to TANF, right? And it's got a really long name, which is why people usually just call it TANF, okay? TANF stands for, I'm just going to write it out here because it's going to take some space, Temporary Aid to Needy Families. Okay, temporary aid to needy families. Okay. This is a program of cash transfers to low-income families, right? This is a relatively new program. It's been around for about 20 years or so. Social Security goes back to the Great Depression. A lot of anti-poverty programs, if they don't go back to the Great Depression, go back to the mid-1960s. Okay, but TANF is about 20 years old. it replaced an older similar sort of program of cash transfers to low-income families that was often referred to as welfare. By the way, the term welfare, which you probably still hear being used today, sometimes you could refer to TANF. Sometimes the term welfare simply refers to means-tested anti-poverty programs in general. So welfare is kind of a casual term that doesn't really have a specific meaning. It often refers to just, again, several government programs, usually though only government programs that are means tested, but sometimes it overlaps with TANF. Okay. Well, this was created about 20 years ago in an effort to reform an earlier program that was intended to help low-income people, but there was concern that that program made people dependent on the program, that it fought poverty, but it didn't encourage people to go out and get work. It didn't really encourage people to try to stop being poor themselves. And the idea was to adjust it with this program, which gives people help, but also, rightly or wrongly, really tries to, provides them with incentives, and you might even say penalties for trying to raise their own incomes and to become sort of financially independent. Okay, a little bit about that in a moment. Okay, TANF is federally funded. So the money for TANF comes from the federal government, but usually administered by state governments. Okay. One of the things that's important about TANF is that it is temporary, right? I mean, that's what it says right there in its name, temporary. Right. So if a family that falls into poverty might be eligible for TANF, but that eligibility lasts for only 5 years. At the end of 5 years, the benefits come to an end. And this was a difference between TANF and the earlier program, okay? And that's deliberate. The idea here is that a family receives the assistance, but they know that it's only for a limited time. And the idea here is that this is going to motivate folks to, try to improve their own sort of economic situation. Right? And also related to this, the benefits for TANF are very much related to, so benefits related to both, what do I have here, job training and job seeking. That's a big part of the program, whereas the earlier program wasn't so focused on that. Okay. This is I mean, again, not nearly so large a program as Medicare and Medicaid, not at all. It's more on the scale of Social Security, I'm sorry, supplemental security income. In fact, it's even smaller than supplemental security income. I think in 2012, federal spending on this would have been about 0.8%. Okay. It's generally been regarded, I think, as a fairly successful program. I remember about 5 years into its existence, there was a lot of concern and controversy. There was concern that these benefits were going to run out for the first time, and that scores of people would maybe start not getting enough to eat and maybe start actually starving. And I don't really know precisely what happened, but I know that there was a lot of concern right up to that date. And then I never heard anything about a huge fallout of, great numbers of, great increases in malnutrition, et cetera. So based on that, my perception, and here I really don't know this is just a perception, is that the program has been relatively successful. The fact that it's still in existence also makes me think that it's been relatively successful. Again, I'd like to know more about this than I do, and I encourage you to look into it a little further on your own, or if we want to in class, maybe we could find some time to find out more about it. I know there are lots of poor people in America to this day who are having a real tough time getting by, so obviously this hasn't made the problem go away. Okay. Lastly, a quick look at one more, and then we'll call it a day and be pretty much out of time anyway. We come to spacing, but I'm not spacing, so there we go. Snap. Okay. Snap. Okay. This is also a program with a long name. So I'll spell it out now. SNAP stands for, what do I have here? Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Okay. SNAP is essentially a sort of financial assistance program. I guess you could call it a cash transfer. It's sort of like a cash transfer, but not quite. I'll explain that in a moment. But essentially, it's a way of giving low-income people, people who've been defined as poor, money to buy food. Okay, that's the basic idea here. Okay. So, however, though, it's not quite as simple as a straight cash transfer program, because you don't actually get cash per se. What you get these days in these digital days is something that looks kind of like a credit card, right? And it's got money on it, and you can take it and go to a grocery store and you can buy food, and you can run that card through a reader, and and you get the food. Okay. However, that's not quite the same thing as getting cash. And the reason is that this is designed to provide you with the card so that you can't take the money and spend it on something else, right? The concern was that if you gave people money that, well, probably a lot of people would just buy food with it, but other people, being normal human beings, might go out and buy things like, well, they might buy, cigarettes, or they might buy alcohol, etc. So that's kind of where this is restricted. It's not the same thing as getting cash. Okay. So at any rate, so SNAP is around. There are other kind of similar programs as well that provide financial assistance for buying food. I'm just going to present SNAP briefly. So, all right, well, there's the lecture, and we're pretty much finished on time. So I hope you have found this informative. My guess is that you have found it informative. There's a whole lot more to know about these programs and the extent to which they work or don't work. But at any rate, I've given you a place to start with. So I'm going to go back to the screen here. I'm going to get out of the screen share. Is this going to work? Okay, I'm out of the screen share. So yeah, so that's the lecture, and I will see you guys in class. As I probably told you in class already, you'll probably be given a brief quiz on this lecture to encourage you to have watched it, paid attention to it, and also, as I always recommend, take notes on it. All right? Okay, well, I'm going to leave my meeting now.